And this is where I need the collective hive mind of you lot to come and help me out, because there is stuff about this I do not get. And to be honest, there's stuff about this the British Museum doesn't get and Wikipedia doesn't get. Hi, it's Todd of Todd's Workshop and Todd Cutler here. And today I've got one of my custom pieces, which is a Todd's Workshop piece. Todd Cutler are my standard pieces. And it is the Seax of Beagnoth. It is a mighty Anglo Saxon sax from the 10th century, found in the British Museum these days, but originally it was the Thames, around about 1857 I think it was discovered. And then, like I say, 10th century before that, when it was an Anglo Saxon piece. And here it is. So it is mighty. So it's a 55 centimetre, what's that, 22-inch blade, something like that. An absolute stonker of the sort of the English broken back style, but not as broken back as the original, but we'll come to that in a minute. Why do we know it's an Anglo-Saxon piece, not a Viking piece? Because it could be Viking, of course, at that time. Mainly, it is blade style shape is one thing, but the other is it is the Seax of Beagnoth. Beagnoth being an Anglo-Saxon name at the time. Not a very common one, but it was there, and you can find it particularly in the sort of the Kentish region. And this blade is inscribed on this side here with the word Beagnoth. The thing that you've immediately noticed is this entire blade is completely covered in inlaid wire work. So it's done from silver, copper, and interestingly, brass. Now, the brass part is one of the many things that are slightly mysterious about this, because usually in the archaeological record, you see the words copper alloy used. Copper alloy means anything which is basically copper and something else, tin and whatever other mixture of stuff. There's often lead and silver and stuff in it with it as well. And that usually comes out in a modern sort of context as something like bronze. Brass is quite specific. It's quite a specific usage because it's got zinc in there. The British Museum records list it as brass. Wikipedia lists it as bronze. I think it's fair to say it's just a mixture of all sorts of junk that is something brassy, bronzy. There's no formal mixture, of course, in this time. Not like there is now. And then the use of the silver and copper, which is completely normal. So, this is a really unusual piece, and it's an unusual piece for a few reasons, and that's really what I want to focus on today. Not the whole history of saxes, but what is weird about this. And this is where I need the collective hive mind of you lot to come and help me out, because there is stuff about this I do not get, and to be honest, there's stuff about this the British Museum doesn't get and Wikipedia doesn't get. So it'd be lovely to try and clear some of this stuff up. What the hell am I talking about? Well, it's really quite simple. This is quite clearly a high status weapon. I'm just going to zoom in now, see if we can get a look at some of the inlay on here. So you can see, the chickens in the background, that there's a whole geometric setup on this side, reasonably consistent, of the same kind of wires and the same kind of punching. Some of the wires are set back the wrong way, so the chevrons go in one direction or the other direction, but nonetheless, it's fairly consistent. And then we end up with the inlay on this side. So here we have got the footwork alphabet, and it is literally the alphabet, going A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, etc. Then we've got some geometric work, a little bit random, then word Beagnoth, a bit more geometric work. The Seax of Beagnoth, and you'll see from this British Museum issued photograph here, is a very, very iconic shape. And it's a very iconic, hard, broken back English sax. And it is literally, in this case, broken back, because there is a crack near the tip end. And in fact, if you rotate that tip end back around, and you connect that crack up, you end up with a blade shape that looks visually very, very different to the one that we are familiar with the Seax of Beagnoth. So that's the first thing I'd say, which is why the blade profile on this one looks quite different to the British Museum one, because the British Museum one in original state never looked like that. The other thing that's really noticeable about the British Museum photos and description is it does not explain the inlay work and how it is done, and frankly the complete mess of it, and that is what the mystery of this is. So we're going to start at the beginning here. I said that it had the footwork alphabet written on it, literally ABC. It is literally a primer of the footwork alphabet, except that the last few letters are in the wrong order, which is interesting, but okay, let's say they got it wrong. Why would a high status warrior, an expensive, rich, presumably very good and accomplished warrior, want an alphabetical primer on his weapon? That's an odd one. Okay, right, let's put that aside. That's kind of weird. But then we come to the geometric side. Well, that is done with some sort of level of repetition, which is I admit, something that we look for in today's aesthetic thing is a repeating of patterns, for instance, not just like random scrawling. Then you go on to the lettered side, the footwork side, and in the museum description, it just lists, I think it's silver and copper wire. But that's not the case. So myself and the very noted bladesmith Owen Bush went to examine this blade 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. And it was immediately apparent that the inlay had been done with all sorts of different wire combinations. And not only that, even singular letters would have 2 or I think even 3 possibly on some cases, different wire combinations within that one letter. And you might get a couple of letters with one wire combination and then a random another set, then another letter which has got like half of this and half of that. There's no method to it, no method that I understand. And then again, the chevron wires that go, where you have your twisted pairs of wires go one way and then the twisted pairs of wires go the other way. Again, there's no coherence. In the modern sense, you would make all your chevrons point the same way. That's just what you would do. That's not what they did. And I'm just puzzled by this whole thing, because the thing is, by the time you have forged the blade, this blade was forged by James Woods, by the way, and all the other work, the inlay work and so forth, was by myself. Once you forge the blade, once you have drawn out the patterns on it, once you've worked out how it's going to be, you punch those patterns in, you undercut them so that you can hammer the wires in and they get locked in. You've done all of that work, you've twisted up your wire pairs, you've drawn your wire pairs, you've twisted them up, you've got all of that ready. That's 99.9% of the work done. And there is no work difference between choosing the silver and copper every time and choosing silver and copper every time to do those letters, or just doing it randomly in the dark, which is kind of what it looks like. So it was obviously one of two things. It was an accident, and you go, well, how can you make an accident like this? And my only conclusion is that you actually had a completely colourblind inlayer who can only see shades of grey, and all of this stuff comes through as shades of grey, especially when you anneal the wires and they become oxidised and dark. Although silver, if it's pure, will stay fairly bright. But he's either colourblind and he just thinks he's got the copper and he actually has got the brass, or it was deliberate. And if it was deliberate, what the hell is going on? Because it makes no sense at all. You've got a high status weapon with an alphabetical primer on it. Weird. And then you've got a high status weapon which could have had some coherence to the inlay and could have been perfectly done, and it wasn't. Now the British Museum take on this, and this was what we were told by the curator when Owen and I went to visit the blade, was it was post-manufacture repairs. And I think that's what they say in the catalogue. And literally, Owen and I, we were told this, and Owen and I just looked at each other and just went, no. We both do inlay, we both do this kind of stuff. There is, I think, no way that this was repaired afterwards. It just makes no sense. It was made like this. Why? So come on, Hive Mind, do your damnedest. Explain to me, explain to the world, what is going on with the Seax of Beagnoth and the inlays. Thank you very much.